6 weeks ago, we talked about church music directing here on this podcast, and I'm going to return to the topic today to talk about what you should do when you're getting started as a church music director with a new church. And I have a good reason for talking about that episode, which I'm going to share with you next. Hello and welcome to the Musician Toolkit episode number 96. My name is David Lane, and it is great to be with you once again. We are fast-tracking our way to episode 100, and so we have 97, 98, 99, and then 100. And offhandedly in a previous episode, I mentioned that episode 99 is when I was going to tell you about maybe some changes to the podcast going forward. But then I realized, well, it seems kind of silly. Episode 100 seems like a better choice for that. So last week, episode 95, today's episode, and the next three are all going to be fairly short solo episodes. I just want to talk about just a few miscellaneous things. I did not have any plans as of a couple weeks ago of even talking about today's topic. I mean, we just talked about church music directing. We did that with Bob Moore, and that was 6 episodes ago. That came out on September 2nd. And we talked about traditional music directing. While I've had a lot of separate roles as a church pianist, as a music director who, would lead choir and handbells and so forth, I never had any experience with the organ, and Bob he's put all of that together. He's played organ, piano, he's led choir. I actually don't remember without re-listening what he said about handbells, but I'm sure he's done that too. So we talked about kind of putting all of that together in terms of a general job and what kind of skills you need. So definitely for general advice on doing well as a church music director, go check that out. Well, again, that came out September 2nd, and I'm going to go ahead and say it was probably 2 weeks after that episode came out that I became aware of an opening for a job that was less than 2 miles from my house, and it is basically what Bob described. It is a part-time job that is an upgrade, both in terms of responsibility, but also financially, over all of my previous jobs. And it is where I'll be expected to play piano, play organ. I will oversee the entire music program. I will lead the music in the service. I'll lead the choir. I'll lead the handbells. I'll be responsible for special programs. And it is a fun challenge I haven't had in a while. So I thought today's episode might be helpful to not just you listening who might be interested in or in a similar situation, but definitely to myself, just to kind of hear me talk some of this out, because I am anticipating that this episode is going to come out on Monday, October 14th. And my first day at this new job is Tuesday, October 15th. So if you're hearing this the day it comes out, it's really that timely. So I have been working on kind of making a list of how I can get started with this new job with a bang. I don't want to be coming in and being asking for a lot of grace while I kind of figure out what I'm doing and so forth. No, I want to take the 2 weeks leading up to my first Sunday to have a plan in place and to be ready for the first Sunday and to make a good first impression with everyone and to have some systems and planning in place that will allow that to be sustainable to go on to the second Sunday, the third Sunday. Start thinking about Advent, the Christmas season. Now, as I said on the previous episode about church music, I want to go ahead and say up front, this is purely a podcast about musicianship. So your personal faith and my personal faith that's not a talking point here. So there is the cooperation with the faith or the beliefs of the church, and no one can say whether or not that is fully your beliefs or your particular faith. Now, as I said before, how much difference you're willing to allow between your beliefs and a church's beliefs in order for you to accept a job as music director is entirely up to you and your own conscience. So lately these episodes seem to have 4 main points to them. So I want to talk about basically the 4 ways that I am getting ready for this new church job. So the first stage, the first thing I need to do is gather information. Some of this involves going online. Some of it involves going to the secretary, getting some booklets, getting some past bulletins for worship services. But mostly involves asking questions. I've already sent, seems like nearly a dozen questions off to my contact person on the personnel committee, who also happens to be in the choir and in the handbells. And so we're making time to get together soon because, again, it was a lot of questions. It'd be asking too much for that to be an email response. So we're going to get together soon and talk through some things. What kind of questions? Or I should say, what kind of information? So you don't need to ask questions to find out some of this. So some of the things that I need to figure out is I need to get to know the library of music they already have. Now, I forgot to mention this earlier. You might be listening to this and you might be in a situation where you are a music director that is the first that this church has ever had. Maybe it's a brand new church and you are literally on the ground floor and you're creating something from scratch. So this episode might not be much help to you because you are literally building the thing. My situation, and what I think most of you would encounter, is that you are coming into something that is already built and established and has expectations, and you are the new guy or the new gal, and you need to figure out how to jump in and kind of integrate seamlessly while you then make plans to distinguish yourself. Okay, so here's some of the information that I'm gathering. Their library of music. What do they have for choir and handbells already? And then in addition to that, what are the pieces of music that they all know pretty well? This is one of the first things I need to ask. My first rehearsal with the choir is going to be on October 16th, one day after I begin. And I don't want to be taking random guesses, so I'm asking someone in the choir to help me find 4, 5, or 6 pieces that the choir knows well so that we can get those ready without a lot of rehearsal time, while it gives us time to pick out some things that are new and more challenging and, to go over it and get it ready. Now, I may adjust that as I get to know the choir. The choir might take to new music really well, and I may have to adjust. Maybe they don't take to new music as well as I thought. So those are some things that we'll have to figure out. I also need to find out about the music budget. What's left for 2024, what's available for 2025, or what's being proposed if it hasn't been voted on. Money for instrumental maintenance, money for buying new sheet music, money for special programs like Christmas time and Easter, and for hiring additional musicians, to create a nice big program. I need to find out traditions and expectations in regard to music. In other words, are they used to big programs around these times? How often are they used to hearing the choir sing? How many times does the choir sing in a service? Are they used to, on the organ, big impressive preludes and offertories there? Or has the organ mainly been used for hymns and it's the piano that gets more attention in terms of like your bigger instrumental pieces? Another bit of information, this is easy to find. It'll probably be handed to you, and you may even know this before you accept the job, but it is a list of job requirements. Now, I've been guilty in the past of going through the process, getting the job requirements, looking at it. Looking at it, signing it if needed, and then putting it away and hardly ever referring to it again. But, I'm older now, and I want to be responsible. I want to do well. So I think it's good to kind of plan to once a month on schedule, take out the job description, review it, and just to make sure that I'm still on task. And then two other things that you want to kind of find out about is theology and liturgy. Again, what you believe doesn't really matter in terms of the job, other than how much difference you're willing to tolerate between what you believe and what the church believes. But you need to know what the church believes. You don't want any surprises. You want to make sure that you kind of understand how they operate. Now, I'll go ahead and say this. Maybe later on I'll give a full description of where I am. But I've done Baptist and Methodist churches before. This is my first time with a Presbyterian church. Now, I know that there's less liturgical and more liturgical types of all churches, but I've been told that this is a pretty traditional church in terms of liturgy. So I need to understand the liturgy of Sunday by Sunday and for the church year. So that is some research that I'll need to do to kind of understand in planning effective music as I go forward. So that's the first thing I need to do is gather information, and some of it involves asking questions, some of it just involves getting documents and, taking time to read, taking time to study. So I need to know about the library of music. I need to also find out about the budget. I need to find out the traditions and expectations with music. I need to know about my job requirements. I need to know about the theology and the liturgy. And then one other thing to kind of throw in there is also, this is really just kind of a self-assessment, my strengths and weaknesses compared to what the church expects. So one thing, for example, is I would probably describe it as an early intermediate organist. Most things on piano for church music, I can probably just sit down and play it. There's very little practice that I'll have to do, except for certain pieces every now and then. There's some accompaniments out there that really need some work. But I'm going to say 95% of the piano music that I play, I'll be able to sight read, because that is my skills on that are stronger than what the expectations are for that instrument. Whereas I really can't think of anything that I would be comfortable right now performing in public on the organ without practicing it at least 5 or 10 minutes, per piece. And that's for like hymns, that are one page. If I'm doing anything for like a prelude or an offertory, I'm going to have to invest some significant practice time, probably measuring on hours per piece, for that to go well until I improve some general skills that will allow me to spend less time per piece. So I need to be planning to spend a lot of practice time to overcome that. And then also, I'm not as skilled as I'd like when it comes to teaching the voice. I feel like I have adequate skills, but they're not special skills. And I want to get to where I'm moving away from adequate and becoming a good vocal teacher in the context of a group. And I know where my weaknesses are. It's like there's some things I do really well, and then some things that definitely need improvement. So I'll be taking time for that. So that's the gather information stage, is just to know where everything stands in the church, what you need to know, what you need to improve. Okay, so the second thing that you want to take time to do is to schedule time in your calendar to be working on the church. So start off with the times that are fixed. Worship service, rehearsal time. So I have a choir rehearsal, I have a handbells rehearsal, and of course I have one church service, and all of that will get put on my calendar certain mornings of the week that I will spend working on those times. Okay, so that's a pretty short self-explanatory goal. But schedule it in your calendar. And again, I'm a fan of calendar apps with notifications, because I found that if you just wing it, if you just say, "Oh, I'll do it on Tuesday morning," and you don't write it down, well, Tuesday morning this week was beautiful outside, and didn't really feel much like working. And if I don't have a device telling me, "Hey, David, it's time to work, it's time to do this now," I'm inclined to maybe skip that or not do it as well. So put a time in your calendar that you can stick to and get some notifications on that. All right, the third thing you do, we talked 5 episodes about this, and I'm going to put it in to application here. 5 episodes ago, we talked about batching. I said batching is one thing that you can actually use to get things done, or it's something you can use to actually get things done. I can't remember how I expressed it. So if you didn't hear that episode, mainly what batching involves is let me give you a specific example for this church. There are 4 things that I perceive that I'm going to need to do on a regular basis that are outside of the fixed times. Obviously, there's leading the rehearsals, there's leading the service, but in getting prepared, I'm going to have to be doing rehearsal planning, service planning, and what I mean by that is, obviously the pastor plans the service, but I need to know, what am I doing for prelude, what am I doing for offertory, what am I doing for postlude, what is the choir singing, what are the handbells ringing, is there special music from a soloist or a duet or a small group, or are we having guest musicians? Now, all of this is going to have to be like, here's plan A, here's plan B, here's plan C, because things come up. But you don't want to be getting to the next Sunday and go, okay, what do we do now? You want to have all this planned well in advance. So that's service planning. Also, for me, as I already mentioned, I need to be practicing the organ. I need to be working to get the general technique better on the organ, and then also develop some repertoire and kind of the ability to learn pieces quicker and to do more advanced music with the organ. And then also, in terms of planning, special programs. So thinking in advance about Advent or Christmas programs, thinking about Easter week programs. So a traditional organization might say, let's work on a little bit of that each week or every 2 weeks. We'll kind of get around to that. But here's how batching works. Batching is to say, I'm going to take this next week and focus mainly on rehearsal planning. So I will sit down on, say, a Tuesday and a Wednesday for a few hours each day, maybe 2 or 3 hours each day. And maybe it doesn't take that long, but this is kind of what I've allotted. And I'm going to take the list that I have of like, what are some anthems, what are some, choir pieces that the choir already knows well, and then go through the library, take the pieces that I want to do, take the information I have about the budget, and think about what are some things I can order. And with all of those titles in mind, I'm going to start planning when are we going to rehearse all of these pieces for the rest of the year. Maybe going into January, I want to sit down and have a minimum of 2 months at a time kind of planned. And again, it doesn't have to be super tight, like I've referenced before. It doesn't have to be like, okay, it's 7 o'clock, we do this. It's 7:10, we do this. I don't have to get that detailed, but I need to have a list of by priority. What are we going to work on the next Wednesday, the Wednesday after that, the Wednesday after that, the Wednesday after that? And, and then maybe off of that, during the batching, I'll make a to-do list of what are some things I need to do. So I need to maybe order the music. I need to get the music ready in folders. And so that becomes make calendar events for when to do those things so that you're not just leaving it up to your own mood. Then I'm going to have a batch for service planning. Now, actually, I don't have to worry so much about this. I'm going to be getting a lot of information from the pastor. The pastor, I've heard, is also a batcher, a long-term planner, so that's going to serve well. But I'll need to take a step further, is after I've met with the pastor and gotten the information about what's being sought out in the services, I will need to then fill in the blanks with what we're singing on certain Sundays. And in essence, that might be the first thing I do. It might be helpful to know what the services are before I plan the rehearsals. So again, I'm glad I'm having this episode so I can hear myself talk and kind of steer myself in the right direction. I need to do service planning before I do rehearsal planning. And then organ practice. I'm going to have time to work on organ practice, and it'll be like the featured for a week. So if the services are all planned, the rehearsals are all planned, I'll do the very minimum I need to clean it up for this upcoming week. And hopefully cleanup is less than an hour. It's 30 minutes to an hour of work. And the rest of that time for a week or two at a time is going to be organ. And when I sit down, I'm going to have specific things like I am going to work on, is going to be heavy on technique for a certain day. And I'm not going to practice anything else. Or I'm going to practice nothing but hymns, specifically hymns that we know that we're going to be doing for the next few Sundays. Now, whether or not that's the same day or different days, it is one session, and I get up and I have breaks between those sessions. Again, this is a thing called context shifting. You want to avoid it. You don't want to just sit down and let me play one thing, then let me go to the next and go to the next. But let's stick with the same type of thing and let the brain get into a flow and kind of maximize the energy for the time that you are sitting down to work on something. And then a day or two, I'll sit down and work on special programs. I'll think about what can I put together, and then some to-do lists. Are there parts I can order? Are there musicians that I can hire and parts I can order for them? Or do I need to put on my composer or arranger hat and create orchestration or parts for these musicians? So again, this is batching, and my hope is that this spreads across 1 month at a time. Like I'm getting to everything within a month. And it's kind of like 1 week gets its own theme. So rehearsal planning, service planning, organ practice, special programs. Now, what I think is going to happen is the special programs is not going to make an appearance every month. It's going to make an appearance 2 or 3 months per year. So that leaves more time to devote to the other three, of which I think organ practice is going to get the biggest batch. So that is probably going to be 2 full weeks of a calendar month where on average I am focusing intensely on that. So batching your work, that's the third thing, to help you get started with a new church music job. And the fourth and final thing for now is making a list of short and long-term goals for yourself and for the church. So as I mentioned already, for me, I want to get better at playing the organ, and I want to get better at teaching vocals well. But until I get a feel for where the church is now and what their expectations are, until I fully have all of that information, I really can't make any goals for the church. But at some point I need to sit down, and this is a part of the job that good music directors do and average music directors don't. Average music directors go with the flow and keep the status quo. But good music directors have a vision of how to do things different, better, bigger, and come up with kind of an itemized to-do list of what needs to be done to make that happen. So that is it. If you're getting started with a church music job, as I am, you want to get as much information as you can, study that information. You want to make time in your calendar to work on the job with notifications. You want to batch your work during that time on the calendar by type of work, that you spend a lot of time at one sitting or several consecutive sittings to get as much work done on one thing as possible, and then put it on the back burner, and so that you can do just a little bit of work. And then finally, once you've been there for a little while and have enough information to determine where the church is and where you are, you create short and long-term goals accordingly, so that you can go from being an average music director to a good music director. And that is going to wrap up episode number 96 of the Musician Toolkit. Just want to remind you, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it. If you are listening to this podcast on YouTube, and again, it's listening because I don't have a video this week. I probably will not be using video until the next time I have a guest or I have something that is visual. But if this is something you really miss, I mean, I value every bit of feedback that you are willing to share with me. So if you say I miss the video, no one has told me that, so you would be the first. But I would hear that. I would listen to that. So let me know if you've gotten this far on the podcast and say, I wish I could watch the video on YouTube. Let me know. Also, if you haven't, it would be great to have a 5-star rating and review on the podcast. So you can do that at Apple Music, and I think you can do that at Spotify. And if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe to this channel. All right, I think that does it for housekeeping. And this episode might have been a little bit longer than the last one. I'm assuming these episodes will all be under 30 minutes, but it'll probably be somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes kind of remaining until we get to episode 100, which will be a celebration episode and just talk about changes that I'm planning to be making to the podcast. So, and again, don't get alarmed by changes. There's not going to be anything major in terms of the things that I'm talking about, but I might be tightening the focus just a bit. But more on that when the time comes. Until then, that's going to wrap up today. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back with you again next week.